So today, we'll be discussing about the evolution of Philippine taxation. Under the evolution of Philippine taxation, we have first, taxation in Spanish Philippines. Next is taxation under the Americans. Then, taxation during the Commonwealth period. And lastly, fiscal policy from 1946 to present. So let us first define taxation. Taxation is a term for when a taxing authority, usually a government, levies or imposes a financial obligation on its citizens or residents. So, sa madaling salita, ang taxation ay pangongolekta ng buwis sa mga mamamayan. Now, Loris Gale will discuss about the taxation in Spanish Philippines.
Taxation in Spanish Philippines. So what is all about taxation in Spanish Philippines? In this report, we will learn about the taxes imposed by the Spanish government in the Philippines. Ang pagbabayad ng buwis o taxes noong panahon ng pananakop ng Espanyol ay sa pilitan. The government introduced new income-generating means. All the Spanish colonies in America and Philippines were required to pay taxes for two reasons. First, as a recognition of Spain's sovereignty over the colonies, o upang maipakita o ma-acknowledge ang kapangyarihan nila sa mga bansang kanilang sinakop. Second, to defray the expenses of pacification and governance. Thereafter, or the act of forcibly suppressing hostility within the colonies. When the Spaniards came, they started to collect tributos or tributes. Tributo or tributes, it was a general tax paid by the Filipinos to Spain na nagkakahalaga ng 8 real o 8 reals, which later increased to 15 reals. It is also a tax paid by the tenant to the landlord. Kung ikaw ay 18 to 50 years old na lalaki, nagtatrabaho bilang karpintero, mananahi, tagagawa ng sapatos, bricklayers, blacksmith, construction worker at nagtatrabaho para sa publiko, ikaw ay nararapat na magbayad ng tributo. But there are exemptions for those who are principals, alcaldes, gobernadors, cabeza de barangay, soldier, members of the civil guard, and government officials. They don't have to pay tributes. In addition, there were also revolts of mga pag-aalsa laban sa tributo. Una, the Cagayan and Dinguez revolts against the tribute, which occurred on Luzon in the present-day provinces of Cagayan and Ilocos Norte in 1589. The Sumarais revolt in the town of Palpag, today in northern Samar. Agustin Sumuroy Awaray and some of his followers rose in arms on June 1, 1649, over the polo cervico or forced labor system being undertaken in Samar, which will be discussed in the next slides. The Maniagos Revolt, which was named after the leader, Francisco Maniago, an uprising in Pampanga during the 1660s. Sancrotum, they were required for the cause of Christianization. Ang sancrotum ay nagkakahalaga ng 3 reals. Ito ay binabayaran kung ikaw ay gustong sumailalim sa Christianization. It also includes the construction of the churches and purchase of materials for religious celebrations. The payment of tribute was stopped in 1884 and was replaced by a poll tax collected through a certificate of identification called the Cedula Personal. So what is Cedula Personal? Cedula Personal is a permit or order issued by the government. It is a personal registration tax certificate in the Philippines which replaced the tribute system in 1884. Kung wala kang maipapakitang sedula, ikaw ay huhulihin. All men and women resident of the island Philippines, mapa-Espanyol, ibang lahi at mga Pilipino na 18 years old pataas are required to obtain sedula. Direct taxes of 1878, which are Urbana and Industria. Urbana, a tax on the annual rental value of the urban real estate. Industria, a tax on salaries, dividends, and profits. Direct taxes included the tributo and sancrotum. It is applied to income and assets. Indirect taxes such as customs, duties were imposed to further raise revenue. Of course, kung merong direct taxes, meron ding indirect taxes. Indirect taxes are taxes that levied on goods and services and the transfer of goods and rights. The colonial government gained income from monopolies such as tobacco. So, paano natin nasasabi yan? Noon kasi, pwede silang magbayad ng buwis in kind or in cash. Kung in kind, pwedeng tabako. Another thing is, they forced the town folks to plant no other crop but tobacco and sell only to the Spanish governments. So, nagkakaroon sila ng mas maraming kita. There is also the what we call polo iservico, or the forced labor, which is males are required to provide 40 days a year. They may opt out by paying the falas of 3 pesos per annum. So ano nga ba ang polo iservico or forced labor? Ito yung sa pilitang pagtatrabaho ng mga lalaking edad 16 to 6 years old of age sa loob ng 40 days na obligadong magsilbi sa mga gawain at proyekto sa komunidad. Pwede kang hindi sumunod sa pamamagitan ng pagbabayad ng falas. Later in 1884, the days of labor was reduced to 15 days. The polo system was patterned after the Mexican Repartimento selection for forced labor. Towards the end of 18th century, the Manila-Acapulco trade, or most known as galleon trade, was established through the galleons, a way by which the Spaniards would make sure that European presence would be sustained. So what is all about this trade? This trade was the main source of income for the colony during the early years. Dahil sa galleon trade, ang Pilipinas ay kumikita sa pamamagitan ng buy and sell. The galleon trade brought silver from New Spain and silk by way of Manila. This trade takes place by exchanging goods such as buying porcelain, silk, ivory, spices, and other exotic goods from China for resale to New Spain, and they bought American silver for resale to China. Towards the end of 18th century, the Manila-Acapulco trade, or known as galleon trade, was established through the galleons, a way by which the Spaniards could make sure that European presence would be sustained. So what is all about this trade? This trade was the main source of income for the colony during the early years. Dahil sa galleon trade, ang Pilipinas ay kumikita sa pamamagitan ng buy and sell. The galleon trade bought silver from New Spain and silk by the way of Manila. This trade takes place by exchanging goods such as buying porcelain, silk, ivory, spices, and other exotic goods from China for resale to New Spain, and then bought American silver for resale to China. However, it also affected the life of Filipinos, especially in its economic growth, because almost all Spanish capital was invested in speculation on Chinese goods, as other powers started conducting business with China in the late 18th century. For further information, there is also what we call the encomienda. It is a system where a form of forced and unpaid labor used by Spanish authorities and settlers in the colonies of Spanish Empire. Bilang kapalit, ang mga manggagawa ay binibigyan ng proteksyong militar at ng pagkakataong maging Kristiyano. In this system, a large tract of land were given to a person as reward for a meritorious act. Ang taong mamamahala nito ay tinatawag na encomenderos, at sila ay binibigyan ng otoridad sa pamamagitan ng pamamahala at pangongolekta ng mga buwis sa mga nakatira rito. At yan ay tungkol sa taxation in Spanish Philippines.
Taxation under the Americans. Before I start the discussion of this lesson, do you have any idea about taxation? So first, what is taxation? Taxation is compulsory. Ibig sabihin nito ay legal sa batas at ang mga taong nasasakupan nito ay nararapat lamang na magbigay ng nasabing buwis. Taxation is coercive money collection. Without taxation, there are no public schools, bridges, hospitals, and other buildings that is owned by the government. Kasama na rin dito ang mga pasweldo sa mga public teachers, public nurses, police, soldiers, and other public servants. Taxation is another method by which the government raises money for expenditures by taxing its people and business organizations. Ito ay isang paraan ng gobyerno upang magkaroon ng pondo na magagamit na panggasta sa bansang nasasakupan nito, kung saan ang mga tao pati na rin ang mga organisasyon sa negosyo ay naatasang magbigay ng exact amount ng pera na nagsisilbing buwis na nakadepende sa estado ng kanilang pamumuhay. From 1889 to 1903, the Americans followed the Spanish system of taxation with some modification. Sa panahong ito, ang mga Amerikano ay ipinagpatuloy pa rin ang nasimulan ng mga Espanyol tungkol sa pamamaraan nila sa taxation. Taxation in this era is modified. Nagkaroon ng mga pagbabago dahil ang taxation ng mga Spanish noon ay masyadong mabigat na maihahalin tulad na lamang sa mga magsasaka noon na pasan-pasan ang mabibigat na responsibilidad sa pagbabayad ng buwis, hindi gaya sa mga mayayaman noon na masasabing less burden. Military government suspends the contract for the opium, lottery, and mint charges for the coinage of money. Urbana was replaced by a tax or real estate which became known as land tax. Opium is a kind of drug that is used as a painkiller. Lottery is a form of gambling. As said by Miss Gale, Urbana is a tax on the annual rental value of the urban real estate, but in the American period of taxation, it was replaced to land tax. Let us know first what land tax means. Land tax is payable annually by the virtue of ownership of the land. It is the capital tax on property imposed by municipalities, based on the estimated value of the property. In this case, ito ay naging legal na at ipinapataw na ito sa rural at maging sa urban real estate. Sa panahon ding ito, ipinakilala ng Amerika ang land and agricultural taxes, ngunit nagkaroon ng problema. Ito ang land titling. The problem with land tax was that land titling in the rural areas was very disorderly. Ang mga Amerikano ay nagkaroon ng problema sa mga lupa sa rural areas dahil ang mga Pilipino noon ay matigas ang ulo at mahirap pakiusapan. Ang problemang ito ay dahil na rin sa resistance o pag-ayaw ng mga Pilipino sa mga Amerikano. The Internal Revenue Law of 1904 was passed as a reaction to the problems of collecting land taxes. It prescribed 10 major sources of revenue. 1. License taxes on firm dealing in alcoholic beverages and tobacco. 2. Excise taxes on alcoholic beverages and tobacco products. 3. Taxes on banks and bankers. 4. Document stamp taxes. 5. Cedula. 6. Taxes on insurance and insurance companies. 7. Taxes on forest products. 8. Mining concession. 9. Taxes on business and manufacturing. 10. Occupational licenses. The Internal Revenue Law of 1904 was patterned after the Internal Revenue Law then in force in the United States. It imposed mostly consumption taxes in the form of particular taxes, stamp and poll taxes, and sale taxes while laying the groundwork for the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Once again, I am Maria Yasmin Gumpal Basilan, the reporter of the topic Taxation under the Americans. The next topic will be discussed by Kuya Fermin Narag.
Taxation during the Commonwealth period. Income tax rates were increased in 1936, adding a surtax rate on individual net income in excess of 10,000. Income tax rates of corporations were increased. Ang pagtaas ng income tax sa bawat individual ay makakaapekto sa buhay ng mga Pilipino. Ang binabayarang buwis ay magkakaiba ayon sa laki ng kinita. Kapag malaki ang kinita, malaki rin ang buwis. Ang pagtaas ng buwis sa mga kumpanya ay maaaring makaapekto sa mga Pilipino. Maaaring itaas ang presyo ng tinda ng kumpanya para mabawi ang tax na maibabayad. In 1937, the cedula tax was abolished, which appeared to be a progressive move. In 1940, a resident tax was imposed on every citizen aged 18 years old and every corporation. Pagtanggal ng sedula ay masabi kong magandang hakbang para sa Pilipino. In 1939, a new tax system. Number 1, normal tax of 3% and the surta on income was replaced by a single tax at progressive rate. Number 2, personal exemptions were reduced. Number 3, corporation income tax was slightly increased by introducing taxes on inherited estates or gift donated in the name of dead persons. Number 4, the cumulative tax, sales tax was replaced by a single turnover tax of 10% on luxuries. Number 5, taxes on liquors, cigarettes, forestry products, and mining were increased. 6, dividend were made taxables. Masasabi kong sa pagbayad ng buwis ng mga produkto, nabawasan ang kita ng pamahalaan. Nagbunga ito ng kakulangan sa magandang serbisyo ng pamahalaan dahil na rin sa kakapasan sa pondo. Pagkontrol sa panloob ng kalakalan, kontrolado ng mga dayuhan ang kalakalang panloob ng Pilipinas. Sa kanilang mga kamay, ang mga industriya, ang kalakalang tingian ay hawak naman ng mga Tsino. In 1939, the Commonwealth government drafted the National Internal Revenue Code, which introduced a tax structure that was an improvement of the earlier system introduced by the Americans. As World War II reached the Philippines shore, economic activity was put to stop and the Philippines bowed to a new set of administration, the Japanese. Ang mga Tsino ang may puhunan na kanilang ginamit sa iba't ibang komersyo tulad ng pagbabangko, pagtayo ng pabrika ng sigarilyo, sabon, kandila at alak. Namuhunan din sila sa kalakalang pabahay at lupa. Isa rin ang Hapones sa mga dayuhan na nagtayo ng kanilang mga negosyo sa bansa. Nanguna sila sa pagtatanim ng abaka, pangingisda, pagmimina, at pagtitinda ng mga produktong gawa sa Japan.
Fiscal policy from 1946 to present. So when we say fiscal, this talks about the money which is collected by a certain government, so still it is about taxation. Rojas Regime, 1946 to 1948. The United States advised adoption of direct taxation, but the administration of President Manuel Rojas declined the proposal dahil ayaw niyang ma-alienate or mahiwalay sa kanyang mga kapanalig sa Kongreso or ayaw niya na ma-feel ng kanyang mga kapanalig na parang they are left out if he will apply or adopt this direct taxation. And also, he needed to consult the Congress, but it will take years to implement or adopt direct taxation, kaya dinecline niya ito. Quirino Regime, year 1948 to 1953. The impetus for economic growth came during the time of President Elpidio Quirino, through the implementation of import and exchange controls that led to import substitution development. By 1949, there was a severe lack of funds in many aspects of governance, such as military and education because of the previous World War that is happened. Magsaysay, Garcia, and Macapagal Regime, year 1953 to 1965. By the virtue of Republic Act No. 2-11, a tax commission was created in 1859 by the succeeding presidencies of Magsaysay, Garcia, and Macapagal. a commission to study the tax structure and policy of the country to make way for a more robust and efficient tax collection scheme post-war fiscal policy remained regressive, characterized by overburdening of the lowest classes, while the landed elite who held business interests were in Congress to ensure that taxes would not be levied to them who belong to the higher classes of society. So, by time to time, they had made ways or laws that will protect or ensure that taxes would not levy to them. So, that's how they use their powers. Marcos regime, year 1965 to 1986. During the former President Ferdinand Marcos, the tax system was still dependent on indirect taxes, such as exercise tax, value added tax, or the VAT, which made up of 70% of tax collection. In this time, taxes remained regressive and unresponsive. Taxes grew at an average annual rate of 15% and generated a low tax yield, and tax effort, which is the index of the tax ratio between the shares of the actual tax collection in gross domestic product and taxable capacity, was as low as 10.7%. Aquino regime, year 1986 to 1992. During the former President Corazon Aquino, the major reform in the tax system was the introduction of value-added tax or the VAT. There was reconstructing happening on the agency, which is the BIR, through Executive Order 127. The computerization was also introduced as well as the corruption was relatively reduced, both tax and revenue effort price increasing in the Marcos time, which is 10.7% to 15.4% in 1992, featuring the uniform rate of 10% on sale of domestic and imported goods and services and 0% on exports and foreign country denominated sales. 10% in lieu of varied rates which are applicable to fixed taxes, advance sales tax, tax on original sale, subsequent sale tax, compensation tax, miller's tax, contractor's tax, broker's tax, film lessers, and distributor's tax, exercise tax on solvent and matches, and exercise tax on processed vegetables. 2% tax on entities with annual sales or receipts of less than 5,200,000. Adoption of tax credit method of calculating tax. Exemption of the sale of basic commodities gaya ng agrikultura and marine food products in the original state price, regulated petroleum products and fertilizers, and additional 20% tax on non-essential articles.
Ramos regime from 1992 to 1998. He ventured into its own tax reform program in 1997 through the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program, which was implemented to make the tax system broad-based, simple, and with reasonable tax rates. Next is to minimize tax avoidance allowed by existing flaws and loopholes in the system. Inimplement din ni Fidel Ramos ang program na ito para mas hikayatin ang mga magbabayad ng buwis by increasing tax exemptions levels, lowering the highest tax rates, and simplifying procedure. Estrada regime from 1998 to 2000. Bali 2 years lang ang term ni Estrada. The succeeding term of President Estrada in 1998 was too short to constitute in any change in the tax system. That means na masyadong maikli yung termino niya para bumuo ng pagbabago sa sistema ng buwis. Arroyo regime from 2000 to 2010. In 2005, the EVAT means Expanded Value Added Tax. It was signed into law as Republic Act 9337. In February 2006, the VAT tax rate was also increased from 10% to 12%. Sinain yung law na ito dahil alam nilang tumataas yung gastos ng government nang hindi nila inaayos yung collection ng buwis or hindi nila ina-adjust yung tax collections. This resulted in large deficits from 2002 to 2004. So, kinailangan ng government ng additional resources of revenue, kaya nilagdaan ni Arroyo ang Republic Act 9337 bilang batas. Kaya mas tumaas yung tax ng mga petrolyo, electricity, distribution at iba pa. Benigno Aquino regime from 2010 to 2016. He ventured the signed tax reform made law by Republic Act 1035. So, itong law na ito is ang pag-adjust ng excise tax on liquor and cigarettes. Mas itinaas ng administration ang tax ng liquor and cigarettes. As a result, it allowed for the increase of the Department of Health budget. Nag-triple yung budget ng DOH noong 2015 and may free na health insurance na rin from the poor people na enrolled sa PhilHealth. Duterte regime from 2016 to 2022. Rodrigo Roa Duterte supported the implementation of the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion law, or what we call TRAIN law. He promised tax reform, particularly in income taxes, as it vowed to lower income tax rates shouldered by working Filipinos. The proposed tax reform also seeks to limit VAT exemptions and increase excise taxes on petroleum product automobiles. It is hoped that reform in the country's tax policy will result in the much desired economic development that will be felt even by the lowest class in the society. And that's all for the fiscal policy. Ano nga ba ang kahalagahan ng taxation? Taxation is crucial because governments collect money and use it to finance social projects. Ms. Rika, you may now read the summary.
So, this is a summary of the discussion of evolution of Philippine taxation. The tribute was form of taxation implemented by the Spanish government in the Philippines in order to support government and church operations. The urbana, which is a tax on the annual rental value of an urban real estate, was replaced known as land tax that charged both urban and rural real estate. New measures and legislation were introduced to make the taxation system appear more equitable during the Commonwealth period. Many laws have been implemented that have increased tax rates even more, but on the other hand, programs have also been implemented to help the poor.
So, before we end this lesson, let me discuss to you the direction of our homework. Write true if the statement is correct, and write false if the statement is wrong. That's all. Thank you for listening.